Okay, now we're going to look at a problem that we need to find the common denominators for. So if you look here, the green words, we're asked to write 4/5 and 1/2 as a pair of fractions with common denominators. So, like I always tell you, we may not always be able to draw a picture or get pieces of paper and draw our paper into the number of equal pieces that it needs to be drawn into. So an easier way that we can find common denominators is to use multiples. The multiples you're going to find are multiples of the two denominators in the two fractions that we're comparing with each other. So we have the fraction 4/5, so the denominator is 5. So I have 5 written out here to list its multiples. And the fraction 1/2, whose denominator is 2. So we need to find the multiples of 2. So when we're talking about finding the common multiples, what we're going to look for is we're going to list the multiples of those denominators, 5 and 2, and then see which one is common between those two denominators. So if I start here with 5, listing its multiples, well, 5 times 1 is 5, 5 times 2 is 10, 5 times 3 is 15, 5 times 4 is 20. Okay, so we have a few multiples listed out there of 5. 5, 10, 15, 20. Now we're going to list the multiples of 2. Well, 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 4 is 8. And 2 times 5 is 10. Now that we have their multiples listed, is there a multiple that is common between both 5 and 2? I see a common multiple of 10. They both have 10 as a multiple. What that means is we could change 4/5 into a fraction so that its denominator is 10, and then we can change 1/2 into a fraction so that its denominator is 10. Then, once they have the same denominators, we would be able to compare those fractions a little bit easier. So, down here we have 4/5 that we're starting with. We have 4 over 5 here for our 4/5, and we have to multiply, remember, we're making equivalent fractions, both the numerator and the denominator by the same number. So here's how we're going to figure out what number we need to multiply them by. We know that its denominator needs to be 10. So I'm going to go ahead and write 10 down here for my final denominator that it needs to be. So I'm going to kind of work backwards a little bit now. If I know 10 has to be the denominator, I will be multiplying 5 by some number so that it changes to 10. 5 times what equals 10? 5 times 2 equals 10. Same rule as equivalent fractions. Whatever you multiply the denominator by, you also have to multiply the numerator by it. So I'm going to take that 2 and write it up here to multiply my numerator. Now I can figure out what my numerator would need to be. 4 times 2 equals 8. Okay, so what this tells us is that 4/5 is equivalent to 8/10. We've just changed it so that its denominator is 10, because now we're going to change 1/2 so that it has a denominator of 10. We want their denominators to be the same. So we have 1/2. We have 1/2. We're going to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by the same number to get our new fraction. So I know what its denominator has to be. It's going to be 10. And now I can think through. If I take the 2 as the denominator and multiply it by some number, that will give me 10. What number times 2 equals 10? 5. 2 times 5 equals 10. The number you multiply the denominator by, you also have to multiply the numerator by the same thing. So we have a 5 here. I'm going to put a 5 up there in my numerator. Now I can multiply those to find out what my final numerator will be. 1 times 5 equals 5. So here's another set of equivalent fractions. 1/2 is equal to 5/10. Okay, but here's what we did. The question at the beginning said to write 4/5 and 1/2 as a pair of fractions with common denominators. So now 4/5 is changed into 8/10 and 1/2 is changed into 5/10. Now they're written as a pair of fractions with common denominators. 8/10 and 5/10 have the same denominator. Okay, we're going to try a couple together. What I want you to do, I'll give you a little bit of time. I want you to get a piece of paper, your notebook, piece of paper you have laying by handy, and a pencil or a pen or a marker or a crayon, something to write with. So get you a piece of paper and something to write with. I'm going to give you a pair of fractions, and we're going to change those fractions into equivalent ones that would have common denominators. All right, let's start with 1/3 and 1/4. Okay, so write down 1/3 and 1/4. Do they have the same denominator right now? They don't. One has a 3, one has a 4. So we need to change those two fractions so that they have the same denominator. We can do this same idea and use multiples of those denominators. So we have the number 3 and we have the number 4. And let's list out their multiples to help us. So 3's multiples would be 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times 5 is 15. 3 times 6 is 18. Let's do the same thing and list the multiples of 4. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times 4 is 16. Now, one thing you can do when you're listing out multiples, you're looking to see if there is a common multiple between those two numbers. So if you get to a point where you say, hey, there's a number that's the same, you can go ahead and stop. You don't have to keep listing out all of the multiples for that number. I was looking here and I noticed that we came to two numbers that are the same between 1/3 and 1/4. Do you see it? It's the number 12. Okay, so since 12 is a common multiple of 3 and 4, that means we can change the fractions 1/3 and 1/4 to a pair of fractions that have a denominator of 12. Okay? Clear my board off here. Give me some more room to work. All right. Now that I know it needs to have a denominator of 12, I know I'm going to take 1/3, and I need to take my 1/3 and multiply it by some number so that I get a denominator of 12. So to help us out, 3 times what number would equal 12? It'd be 3 times 4, right? So now I need to multiply my numerator by 4 too. 1 times 4 equals 4. So now I've taken 1/3 and found an equivalent fraction for it, 4/12, with a denominator of 12, because I know their denominators have to be 12. That was what was common between them. So 4/12, I'm going to go like this so I have some room here. Go ahead and write that out there. 4/12 is equal to 1/3. We changed 1/3 to 4/12. Now we need to change 1/4 into a fraction that has that same denominator of 12, right? 1/4. Okay, I'm going to shorten this down a little bit and show you so you don't have to draw out all of those steps. Think about when we did equivalent fractions. You are trying to find a fraction with a denominator of 12 that's equal to 1/4. So you could think about, okay, to go from 4 to 12, what did you do here to this 4 to change it to a 12? You would multiply it by 3. If you want to put like a little times 3 down there to help you, you can do that. 4 times 3 equals 12. Whatever I do to the denominator, I also do to the numerator. So now I have to do 1 times 3 to get my numerator. And 1 times 3 is 3. So now 3/12 is equal to 1/4. And I have changed those two fractions of 1/3 and 1/4 into a pair of fractions, 4/12 and 3/12, that have a common denominator. Okay, let's try one more together. Keep your paper, and we'll walk through it now and maybe take away a few steps to make it a little bit easier for us. Let's try the fractions 1/4 and 5/6. Okay, that's our new fraction pair, 1/4 and 5/6. We need to change these fractions so that their denominators are the same. So I'm going to think about the number 4 as my denominator and think about the number 6. I need to think through a multiple of both of those numbers. So I could think, okay, 4, 8, 12. 6 multiples of 6 would be 6, 12. There's the same multiple right there. So I need to change both these fractions so that their denominator is 12. Here we go. To change 1/4 to a denominator of 12, 4 times what number would give us 12? 4 times 3 would give us 12. So we're going to multiply the numerator by the same number. 1 times 3 would be 3. Now we're going to change 5/6 so that it has a denominator of 12. 6 times what number would give us 12? 6 times 2 equals 12. So now we need to multiply 5 times 2 to get our new numerator. 5 times 2 equals 10. So if we do a little bit of mental math thinking through the multiples of the denominators that we have and thinking through what we would multiply that denominator by to get the new denominator, you don't have to write out as many steps as what we did here in the first couple of examples. So if we are asked to change 1/4 into 5/6 into a pair of fractions that have a common denominator, it would be 3/12 and 10/12. Then here's what you could do with that. You could look and say, okay, if I'm comparing 3/12 into 10/12, could you know which fraction is showing more? Yeah, because now they're both out of the same number of equal parts. They're both out of 12 equal parts. This one would have 10 out of those 12 parts. This one would be 3 out of those 12 parts. And 10 is greater than 3, right? So 10/12 is greater than 3/12, which means that 5/6 is greater than 1/4. That's why we need to know common denominators. It helps us to be able to compare fractions. All right, I hope that helps you understand common denominators a little bit more. Bye.